Hello. Welcome to another in the series on the Bhagavad Gita. Another video, that is. Today, we're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 3, verses 13 to 16. Devotees who eat food that has been purified by the ritual of devotional gratitude are relieved of any guilt associated with that food. But those who eat gluttonously and without gratitude or awareness are committing terrible deeds. Our bodies grow from food. Our food grows from the rain. The rain is thanks to the spirits. We must act to honor them. You should know that all actions come from Brahma. They are a direct manifestation of the divine. So Brahma is everywhere and will always be present in our rituals. Therefore, one who does not follow the way of ritual in this life, one who lives shamefully only for the pursuit of desires, is wasting his life, son of Partha. So in our previous video, Krishna had been talking about the rituals, and he had so far already made a certain distinction between religiousness, false religiousness as he calls it, and actual spirituality, let's call it, right? That the religiousness is to go through the motions of these ceremonies in order to try to make some kind of a deal with the divine, to get something back, to get something out of it, to make a bargain. Whereas sincere spirituality is actually about inner consciousness. It has very little to do with what you're doing on the outside. But yet, he doesn't say that you shouldn't do things on the outside, right? And in these verses, we see something that has a lot of layers to it. And the people who are in kind of the orthodoxy of Hinduism or of certain Hindu sects end up generally looking, I'm not going to say at the wrong interpretation, but we could say at the most shallow interpretation, right? Like you look at verse 13 and for some people, all they're going to take from that, devotees who eat food that has been purified by the ritual of devotional gratitude are freed of any guilt associated with that food. All they're going to take from that is that you need to do these rituals, right, to purify your food, right? And in fact, there's far more to it in what Krishna is saying. That Krishna was very clever in his subversiveness, in that he wasn't one of these teachers that ever would directly put himself in a place of confrontation with the religious orthodoxy. Instead, like a good prankster, he turned it on its head, right? So if we break this down in the first layer of interpretation, let's say, verses 13 and 14 tell us that our food brings with it certain karmic consequences, the guilt associated with that food. That is to say, other life had to die so that you could eat, right? You have a level of guilt. Well, even if you're a vegetarian, everything you eat is something that was once alive and then you eat it and it's not, right? So there is a level of karma associated, you could say, with food. And Krishna here says that if you purify through the ritual of devotion, of gratitude to the spirits and to the divine, then this liberates you from the effects of that karma. And that sounds like what he's mainly advocating is the performance of these rituals. But what he's really saying here, because if you look at the next part of verse 13, he says, but those who eat gluttonously and without gratitude or awareness are committing terrible deeds. And so if you're he doesn't say if you don't perform the rituals, you're committing terrible deeds, right? He says if you eat gluttonously without gratitude and without awareness. Now, you could do the ritual, you could go through the motions of ritual purification and still be eating gluttonously, still be eating without gratitude, still be eating without awareness, right? So what he's really talking about here is an inner perspective. We have to honor the spirits, not because of the spirit's power or something like that, but because they are part of the cycle of nature. They're part of the natural world, and we actually have to honor everything in the natural world. That's what the very next line says in line 15. He says, you should know all actions come from Brahma. And so if all actions come from Brahma, that means that everything, it has the presence of the divine. Brahma is just the term for the greatest, highest version of the divinity, right? Which is just this all-encompassing deity. It's like the tetragrammaton in Western Kabbalism, right? And so Brahma is everywhere and will always be present in our rituals, but of course he'll also always be present everywhere else. All of this comes down to this question of action, of what type of action should you take. Because remember that all of the Bhagavad Gita starts when Arjuna wants to do something that isn't his real will to do. He's afraid of what's going on in the battle. He sees failure before him. Even if he wins, everything will be lost. And he kind of loses hope, and he wants to drop everything and run off to the forest and become a hermit. Now, if Arjuna went and became a hermit, would Brahma be there? Well, according to Krishna in this line, yes. So the difference isn't about what you're doing on the outside or where you are on the outside. It's about your reasons for doing things. It's about what's going on the inside and your inner consciousness. This is a big issue, a big problem in any belief system that doesn't break down into dualism, right? If you want to have a religion that says there's all this stuff that's good and all this stuff that's evil, and in the good stuff, it was all made by God, and the evil stuff was made by the boogeyman or something like that, right? And so there's no God in that stuff that was made by the boogeyman. God's not there, right? That makes it viable to be able to create that division, and then what you do on the outside matters, right? If you're eating the food that the boogeyman made, then you're going to hell or to wherever it is that the boogeyman is going to take you, right? But if you have an understanding of reality as it actually is, which is to say non-dual, that there is this oneness that we can call God, or we can call Brahma, or we can call it the great architect, or whatever you want to call it, right? That encompasses all things, right? It's inside you, around you. It's like the force, right? It's everywhere. And if that's the case, then there's really, on the one hand, it would seem like the answer would then be, then you don't have to really do anything, do you? Because if every action has God in it, if everything you do is still going to be God, if you're still God no matter what you do, if everybody you love and everybody you hate is going to be God, if God is actually omnipresent, then why do we have to do anything? Why do we have to do certain things and not other things, right? Now, Orthodox religion almost always fails to address this issue, right? Some of them respond to it by personalizing God, by saying, yeah, God's all over the place, but there's stuff he wants you to touch and stuff he doesn't want you to touch, even though, it's all him, right? But if you don't take that kind of approach, if you don't reduce God to the level of human pettiness, then you still have this problem of fulfillment, because there are some people that are going to say, well, yeah, man, that's because, I'm a Taoist and I can do just whatever and it doesn't really matter. And if I sit for 6 hours playing video games, it's exactly the same as if I sat for 6 hours meditating, and I don't have to do any rituals because I just, imagine stuff in my head and then it's all happening, right? And, those guys, you can fool yourself for some of the time, but you're not going to fool yourself for all of the time. There is a fundamental problem, which the Buddha called the problem of suffering, right? I could call it the problem of fulfillment, because I'd rather look at it from the positive spin than the negative one, which is that there's still, even if you come to understand that, or at least come to trust, if you don't yourself understand it yet, that there is this all-encompassing divinity, there's still a problem with you, right? There's still levels at which you are not, and there are times where you recognize that you are not acting in accordance with how you really should be and what is really true. And there's an inner guide, that a kind of a conscience that directs you in that. And you can call it the holy guardian angel, if you like, or you could just call it the true will. So what Krishna is really doing in these 4 verses is he's twisting around the intention of orthodoxy and saying you have to do these rituals because you have to do these rituals because, God tells you to. And he's twisting it around to saying, no, we have to do everything ritualistically. And the ritual that we're doing, it's not about what we're doing on the outside. It's about fulfilling our inner will. So every act should be a conscious act. Every act should be an intentional act. And if you're doing that, if you're leading a ritual-based life, not because you're trying to get something out of it on the outside, but because it changes the whole perspective of your being on the inside, then you start to move away from the shameful pursuit of desires, as Krishna puts it in verse 16. So it's really about saying ritual is really important, but not for the reasons that the priests would tell you, but rather because ritual is the way that we draw the sacred out and connect the universe and ourselves. So if you're eating your food really gluttonously, right? If you're just chugging it in there and you're not paying any attention to what you're doing, then you're not actually having that experience of the sacrament of the food, right? And instead, you're getting caught up in more desire, because people who do that end up not feeling satisfied by what they've done. They slip into this unconscious mode, this deep animal mode, and they're just eating like a pig in a trough, and then they get nothing from it, right? If you're eating without gratitude, if you're eating without awareness, if you're not recognizing the cycle of nature, if you're not paying attention to reality as it is around you, then you end up committing a terrible deed. You end up suffering because you are caught up in the pursuit of desires. And when you are still focused only on the external, ironically, that's when you don't end up experiencing that sacrament, which could be anywhere for you. It could be in anything. You don't have to go find it on top of a holy mountain. But you have to learn how to be able to do 2 things. You have to be able to have the insight to draw your awareness, and you have to have the concentration to be able to focus on where you are in this moment. And that's what all of meditation and all of ritual fundamentally is about. If you're able to make that connection by ritualizing what you do, then you end up dissolving the barrier, the difference, the space, that gap that sometimes can end up feeling like an emptiness within you, or can feel like a separation from the world. That gap goes away and you become a part of reality. And there's only certain actions which allow you to do that, and certain others that don't, but not because of the actions, because of your motives for those actions. If your motives are related to desire, to lust of result, whether to get something or to get away from something, then you can't bring out the consciousness. Where consciousness is, those things aren't. So as soon as you can bring out the consciousness, then you not only can do things to get that sense of connection, but you know exactly what you have to do to get that sense of connection, if you've reached that level of awareness. Now that takes practice, and that's where spiritual discipline comes in, which is why at the end of the day, Krishna advocates for having ritual, for having not just the ritual of doing everything in your life, but actual ritual of a practice, of a set of cultivation exercises, of a set of meditations, of ritual performances, of magic, of whatever you want to call it. Those things are important because if you've been separated from reality for so long, you don't know how to connect to it without having this abstraction, this system that gets put into place that allows you to cross that gap. So that's everything for today. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and feel free to share this. Also, check out my Yifa Society playlist on this channel, because that's where I'm doing my teaching now, and if you're interested, please get in touch. Thank you very much.